In today's Mishnah Berurah, we are back in Siman Kuf Nun Aleph. We are in 151 in Orach Chaim. And Mishnah Berurah, we're talking about the proper conduct for holiness in the basic Knesset, in the shul. So that's what we're working on. And we are talking about the going through the basic Knesset. We are in Halacha 5, 151.5. So we talked about the first step of it was whether or not you were allowed to eat and drink and those things there, and we talked about what it means to learn there. Now we're going to talk a little about just moving through the basic Knesset. So if the shul has two openings, one should not go through this one opening in order to go through the second one as a shorthand or a cut through to cut through someplace else. So if you live on, let's say, the north side of shul, you shouldn't walk through shul to the south side and walk through that door in order to get to the marketplace, for example. You have to go around the whole building. Now, if that was... Okay. And if there was a way to go that way ahead of time. So what happened was that, let's say you lived somewhere and there was an open field and there was a path that cut through it, and then they built the shul there, you may continue to use that path. Another thing that would be permitted is that if you only entered for the intentional purpose in order to, if you didn't walk in there for your only intentional purpose was to shorten it, that would also be okay. So, meaning you walked in there to do something else. So when you come in to, let's say, daven, so if you came in through, let's say, one side, you can go out the other side. So the Mishnah Berurah explains the following, that he says that there's a mitzvah to look like somebody who wants to be in shul. And the Gemara says that it says that when the people would come to visit, meaning this is how Yechezkel set it up, if the people would come to visit the shul, the base of Mikdash, the thing that was proper to do was they would open up the north side gate, and this was specifically mentioned on the holidays, but this also applies to every day, and you would leave through the south side one. And the reason was because it looked like you enjoy being there in the shul. Okay, another rule for shul, number 6 over here. So it is permitted to enter the shul with your walking stick, but a shul built inside of a large Jewish academy. Hold on. And entry to one area is only accessible by going through the synagogue. Can't get the... Maybe come back up. Send me your... I don't know why it's not letting me summon up the content. There we go. Let me see. Top chat. There it is. What about a shul built inside of a larger Jewish academy, and entry to one area is only accessible by going through the synagogue sanctuary? So you should, that in that situation. So for example, let's say you have a part of the building on the other side of shul, right? So you have like a lobby, then you have the shul, and then on the other side you have another room. Let's say it's the base of Medrash, whatever. You should stop in the shul and sit down and learn something, or say some Tehillim, to say a few like a prayer. So like sit down on one and say one chapter Tehillim, and then continue on into the next shul. All right, let's go back to Halacha 6. So one may enter shul with their walking stick and with their bag, or even with a backpack. Okay, and these are different types. The Ramah adds these are different types of bags. They're called a makal, tarmil, and afudana. Okay, these are different types of packs. And some people say you may not walk into shul while holding a long knife, or even with an uncovered head. Okay, so those are not appropriate. So the Mishnah Berurah says, what's the deal with the long knife? The shul is a place that is meant to be specifically used for prayer, and it's a place where we talk about one should have length of days, and a very long knife is something that can actually make someone's life a little bit shorter. And there are people who say, like the Eliyah Rabbah, who say that it's only talking about if you're walking with an uncovered knife. So if you cover your knife or it's in your bag, it's not a big deal. Okay? And so he says also an uncovered head. And the Mishnah Berurah says that you should look earlier in Siman Sadi Aleph, Sif Gimel, okay, and in the Bir Halacha over there. So those are referring to the laws of prayer. And in that section, the Mishnah Berurah says the following. So let's look first of all at the halacha over there. He says that one cannot say a mention of God's name with a head that's uncovered. Okay, so that's what the halacha says over there. And some say that you shouldn't even come to shul with a head uncovered. So the Mishnah Berurah says over there that we even talk about one shouldn't even walk around all day long in Siman Bays. One shouldn't walk around all day long without their head being covered. So certainly not walking into shul. And so that case is talking about not to walk even a few steps. And here we're talking about even less than a few steps, but your head's uncovered. So like you're sitting here in shul and everything falls off. You should make sure to put it back on. Okay? And so he says that's what these different rules are all talking about. Moving right along in the halacha over here. One is permitted to spit in shul, okay? Meaning like if you have something that is clogging up your throat, okay? As long as you rub it below your feet, okay? Because of assuming the floor is also made out of dirt, or if there's going to be some type of soft substance that you can rub it into, like reeds or something else nearby, you may go ahead and do that. Okay, so that's permitted. So the Mishnah Berurah says it's permitted to go ahead and spit. That's assuming it's not during prayer. Okay, so you can't hock a loogie. So to lean back, snort it back, and then spit it out, not proper. We learned that earlier in Siman Sadi Zion in chapter 97, halacha 2. Okay, and you also shouldn't spit in front of your friend because that's gross. And we learned that actually also, one should spit inside his talis. There's also in the Siman Bays, which we mentioned just a second ago. And so he actually mentions that the Ari would never spit anywhere near shul at all. And we said it was important to rub it into the ground. That's not permitted to do that on Shabbos. Okay? And also you can spit it into reeds or straw and sand, as long as it's covered up. Okay, halacha ches, number 8. The mud that's on one's feet should be wiped off before coming into shul. So wipe your feet before coming into shul. And it's also appropriate that you shouldn't have any type of dirt on you at all. So you should be very, very clean. No Mishnah Berurah on this. Have a clean body, clean shirt. Okay, so basically clean yourself up before coming to shul. Halacha 9. So we say that the custom is to treat them with honor, okay? And this means that you have to do certain things with your clothing. One is to go ahead and to do what's called l'chabdan, and the other one is l'rabtzan, okay? And so there's certain types of cleaning that need to be done inside the shul. So what we need to do is we need to do what's called kibud habayis, which is sweeping it, and then revichas habayit, which is to keep the dust down. And the custom is also to light candles inside of it to honor it as well. So the Mishnah Berurah explains this custom of lighting candles. It says, our custom is to light the candles before people come in to daven, because people should find that the prayer house is well lit and well attended, okay, and that there should be there, and then that's a welcoming to God's presence. And furthermore, this is what they used to do in the temple as well, which is to have everything lit before the people would come into the courtyard. Halacha 10, even after the destruction of the temple, the shuls are considered holy. Okay, I'm sorry. Even after their destruction, if the shul is destroyed, their spot is considered holy, and just like we were treating them with honor when they were built up, we also conduct ourselves with honor in them when they are destroyed, except for sweeping and keeping the dust down. And if there are a number of and if there's a number of places where the grasses and things start sprouting in there, you can leave them in that spot so that people should feel somewhat bad about this destroyed, and then they should try to feel somewhat motivated to build it back up. This was kind of what the conduct that they did with the what's known as the Churva synagogue. The Churva synagogue is the one that's in the middle of the Jewish quarter. It had been standing since probably the 10th or 11th century, and it was destroyed in 1948 by the Jordanians, and it sat destroyed for about 40 years until they were able to raise money to rebuild it. And so the idea was that was basically the idea behind it, was to constantly bring people tours to the Churva, and so it was built up eventually. So the Mishnah Berurah explains after they were destroyed. So these are the synagogues and the learning houses. And the reason is because it says that we have been warned about having our holy places destroyed, but it's referring to that that they would be destroyed, but not in perpetuity. Okay, and that's to tell us that their kedusha, their holiness, would be there in perpetuity. And it doesn't matter if they were in the Holy Land themselves in Eretz Yisrael, or if they were outside the land of Israel, unless there was some type of condition, which we'll learn about in a moment in Halakha 11. So the question is, are we allowed to pull the grass? It sounds like not, but according to the Mishnah Berurah, it says no, really, it is permitted to pull them out. But you just can't take them out of their spot. So that way people should see them and feel there's a reason to go ahead and build it back up. And therefore, if the entire shul was completely removed from its spot and you build it somewhere else and they have no reason to go back to that spot, then this rule doesn't apply. So instead, what you should do is sort of fence it off and not let people treat it, disrespectfully, and let them know that this is not a place for them to just go ahead and do whatever. And we're going to talk about that later on in chapter 153. Okay, and then in that place we learn about how to set it up so that it can be a sale to sell it to remove the holiness from it. Okay, halacha 11. Okay, at the time of building the shul, you make a condition on it to be able to use it as like a public meeting house. That's permitted. And even then, too, when it's destroyed, you can also treat it like a public meeting house. But as long as the shul is still standing, you can't use this condition. Okay? And even when it's destroyed, it doesn't mean that it's permitted to be used for any type of unreasonable and somewhat unappealing use. You shouldn't be you shouldn't be growing stuff in it. You shouldn't be using it as an office. So that's not what this condition is talking about. Okay? So that's when we're talking about using a shul that way, and that's outside the land of Israel. But inside the land of Israel, you can't use the shul for anything. These conditions don't count. So the Mishnah Berurah says that the Mishnah Berurah is asking the question that if you went ahead and just say it's only going to be a shul for temporary time period, Okay, 1 second over here. So if you're going to use it for a temporary time period, so at the time when you build it, you have to make the condition. Okay. Okay, and then he says you make this condition on it, which seems to say that you make a condition and you state it at the time of the building, right before you start building it. But you can't just assume that that's the case. So you have to actually say the condition or state it explicitly. And this is actually a dispute amongst the decisors that, but there are some people who allow you to be lenient on it, but you should be strict and make the condition anyway. And we say that you should be strict on it, that the condition applies on it, to be strict with it even after it's destroyed. So that condition that you make works even after it's destroyed. It's permitted to use it, okay, and you make use of it as long as it's not something that's not appropriate, which we'll get to in a second. But as long as the shul is built up, you can't make a condition to say I'm going to use it in a few certain ways. You have to be using it either as a shul or as a base medrash. And further, we're saying, and that means that these conditions are to permit eating and drinking, or even to come in there to get out of the sun because of the sun, or the rain because of the rain. Okay, and also the prohibition on being what's called kalos rosh, which is being somewhat silly. But all the other things are fine to make a condition on it. So things that are not permitted to use it for are things like putting seeds in there, and anything else that we'll see later on in chapter 153, because these are considered even more disgusting than stuff in there. And also even to sit there and use it as an office, even if it's for the whole community. Because when you're doing it for the whole community, it's that you're making a big noise in the area. And that's also, when you have people making a lot of noise, that's also considered really disrespectful. And the Pri Megadim points out that if a person sitting there doing his own books inside of the destroyed synagogue, excuse me, this condition would work. It's basically like doing something for yourself. The Rabbeinu Yerucham says that having it for public use means that it's for their needs, and so he also includes even a single person from doing even his own needs in there, because it's considered disrespectful. And these conditions only apply outside the land of Israel, because we know they're not supposed to be there forever. You know, you're supposed to stay there for a certain amount of times, and then when the Redeemer comes, we're going to leave, right? When Mashiach comes, and that's why. So that's why you can only. That's why in Israel, the holiness sticks around. Okay. So there's no condition that works for when it's in the land of Israel. The reason is that he passes a certain way. However, the Magen Avraham says that no, you could make a condition to allow use of a decommissioned synagogue, as long as it's not frivolous things being done. Okay. Okay. So let's finish off this chapter over here. So we say in the last halakha here, one should be careful from making some. Did you have a question? Okay, go ahead and put the question in the chat. I'll get to it in a second. One should refrain from making a use on the steps of the synagogue. Okay, something that is a regular occurrence, which is inappropriate. Ah, you're welcome. I was having a tough time. It's hard for me to kind of sit here, read down, and I keep poking the screen to get the timeout button. But yes, that's what that was. It was not popping. At first, I thought I paused it, and then I just wanted to move forward with the class. You're welcome. Okay, so the step shouldn't be used for some type of inappropriate use. That's something embarrassing, such as for laying there or those type of things, such as I guess having picnics, right? Um, However, we're not. Other things may or may not be permitted. The Ramah says that this is also by a basic knesset that's used regularly. That was at first built for that purpose. But if it's a house that was built and then used later as a basic knesset, then you can lay on the steps. Okay. Okay, and it's also talking about using the. Okay, something. There's no. A note over here that the aliyos is not just the steps; it could also be the upper levels. Okay, so don't the property of the shul. Don't just use it to hang out there. Okay, so when we say to not use some type of regular use that's just not appropriate, what we're saying is that it's talking about like taking a nap there. So you go up and take a nap because sleeping is not really disrespectful, right? People used to sleep in the shul. That's where they would stay, and that's why we have kiddush on Friday night in the shul. But other types of usages may be perfectly fine. It's just using it permanently for sleeping is a problem. So you couldn't live in the shul, but even that was something that was possible. So let's take a look at here real quickly. So it says there's a question if this is similar to the area in the base of Mikdash and in the courtyard of the base of Mikdash. Okay, so you were allowed to do certain things like sit down and other things like that, which you normally weren't allowed to do in the actual Mikdash itself, in the actual sanctuary itself, in the holy temple. So since a shul and base medrash are considered tiny temples, right? So maybe that rule should be the same as sitting when you're in the presence of the heichal, which was the central part of the sanctuary, like where the Aron Hakodesh was, the Lachem Apanim, and the Ketoris, and the menorah. So we say that you should try to be strict about that. Okay, and so the Shari Tshuva. Oh, if it's for safety, people used to hide the shul all the time for safety. That was common during the Crusades. That you could definitely do. We're talking about over here using it for what we call the Tashiv Shel Ganai, like an inappropriate or somewhat lackadaisical approach to it. Oh, we're at shul. I'm going to take a nap. I'm going to take a nap on the pews. I'm going to take a nap on the table. I'm going to pull up next to the svarim and just chill out over there and drink a soda. Those type of things would be inappropriate. Yeah, you're welcome. So in the language of the Rambam's shuvos that are brought in the Shari Tshuva, so the main problem of the laying down and sleeping is only a problem when you're directly over the main part of the sanctuary where the Sefer Torah is, and that you shouldn't be laying down over it. So the Ramah says that there's more leniency if you take a house and turn it into a shul. So there's bedrooms upstairs. So the shul's either going to be on the main floor or in the basement, and there's bedrooms upstairs. Can you sleep in those bedrooms? And he says, yeah, you could. And so too, at the time when you built the shul, and you built the shul where you knew originally you're going to have a hotel upstairs for travelers to stay in. That's also fine, okay? Because that means that that spot is left unsanctified. Now, to do things that are inappropriate usages, right, like to store gross stuff in there or to hoard things in there or to leave storage areas above the shul is not appropriate. So that's always prohibited. And so therefore, one should make a shul if there's a certain room upstairs that is kind of yucky. And based on this, there people would be potentially exposing themselves to punishment from God. And so the custom that's spread around in most cities is that they used to rent out the shuls for a certain amount of times for housing on the bottom levels, on the upper levels. And there would be lots of little children over there, and but since people have little children, they felt that they would be careful and clean it up after themselves. Okay, and so the last thing was he says that you could sleep up there. He says nonetheless, one should be careful to stay away from this. Just a fun little fact. In Israel, it's quite common that people will object to someone opening a shul in the basement because of this reason. So and the rule of kosher mishpat, the people can protest that. So you could let a person stay in a separate room in the shul over Shabbos as long as it wasn't over the main sanctuary. Yes. Or you could build the shul with the intent of having rooms over the sanctuary, letting them know that certain things wouldn't be able to have with it. And you have to move the bathrooms to the other side of the building. You couldn't have the bathrooms directly over where the shul and the aron and stuff like that is. There's also a problem. For example, you have these really tall buildings, and someone in the basement, in the party room, or whatever it is, wants to have a shul there. So there was a shaila that I saw where the question was, could they open up a shul in the basement, or could neighbors prohibit it? And so it's mistaber that they could go ahead and say, no, they can't open downstairs. The neighbors could protest because then it's going to require everybody upstairs to have to be careful with where they store stuff. They couldn't, have their bathroom there. They couldn't, their kid's bedroom couldn't be in there. They couldn't have like a one of those diaper genies in the room because that would be inappropriate. So people can have all types of complaints and good reasons to have those complaints. Thank you for joining this week. We'll pick up next week with more laws of the basic Knesset. And as always, feel free to, if you have further questions, to reach out on WhatsApp or via email or whatever works for you, or comments on video. And we'll see you next time.